How do you mentally zone in to push through those difficult periods, or to push through those difficult stages where you feel it might be impossible? To push past the limits that you have created for yourself. How do you do that? Because let's be realistic. There are going to be times that it's difficult. There are going to be times where it feels like you just can't do it. And there are going to be times where you doubt yourself and you feel like it's impossible. And those are the times where you need to be mentally strong, where you need to zone in mentally to be able to continue pushing forward. On that note, welcome to this episode of the Mandy Meyer podcast. As per usual, this is the podcast where we chat all about your health and fat loss and all about how you can achieve your goals on your health and fat loss expedition. Before we get into today's episode of how to zone in mentally, this is just a reminder that the entries for my next 4-week challenge that starts on the 8th of September are opening at 9 a.m. South African time this morning. This 4-week challenge is your golden opportunity to start working on the fundamentals when it comes to creating healthier habits, which are the fundamentals of you creating a healthier lifestyle and having fat loss be a byproduct of the healthy habits that you are creating. The link to the challenge is in the description. Please note that spaces are very limited and the last 4-week challenge sold out within 2 days. Now, let's have a look at how you can zone in mentally to push past your limits so that you can achieve all the goals that you've set out to achieve. Now, a big thing of pushing past the limits is actually identifying what the limits are and what limits you have created for yourself. Because oftentimes the limits that are out there have been self-created. And if you can break those limits or do away with those limits, it does become far easier to push through them. The first limit that I have seen many people create for themselves is basing all progress on that number on the scale. The reason why I say it is a limit is because as soon as you see there is no shift or a very small amount of shift on that number on the scale, that is oftentimes where it becomes very difficult to continue moving forward. So how do you mentally zone in to push past this limit? Well, first, break that limit. If the lack of scale progress or the scale or the number on that scale is one of your limits and it feels that you have to mentally zone in to push past that limit, why not just remove that limit from the plan? Because ultimately that's going to make it slightly easier for you to zone in mentally and to have enough mental energy to push through any other limits that come your way. So when it comes to the number on the scale, you can either constantly fight it or you can shift your mindset to knowing that that number on the scale is not the only way of measuring progress, or you can also just remove the scale from the equation totally so that you have enough brain capacity, enough mental energy to focus on everything else that is important. Another limit that you may have created, which you feel like you need to push through, is the fact that you have created big victories or big areas or points of celebration or wins for yourself. By doing this, you're not allowing yourself the opportunity to celebrate all the small wins, all the small victories. And that can be tough because it might feel as though it's a constant long battle for you to fight until you get to a point of being able to celebrate something. Let's use weight as an example. Maybe you've set yourself a celebration point of 10 kilograms or a celebration point of getting to below 100 kilograms. Who knows how long this might take? It might take 6 days, it might take 6 weeks, it might take 6 months. And to keep pushing when you have nothing small to celebrate, well, that is going to require that mentally you need to be fit. Mentally, you need to zone in. But how can we make that zoning in easier? Well, instead of focusing only on your big wins, how about focusing on smaller daily wins? Smaller non-scale victory wins. Smaller wins that you can celebrate on a daily or a weekly basis. By doing this, you are allowing yourself to see progress that isn't only massive amounts of progress. This is really going to help you focus more to be able to continue pushing forward. So remove that limit of focusing only on the big wins and start setting yourself smaller little areas or smaller points of victories or celebrations which allow you and actually also force you to acknowledge all the amazing progress that you are making. Another big limit for many people is relying on motivation. And a lot of people ask me, but Mandy, how do we push through the period of not being motivated? And a lot of people believe that they need to be 100% dialed in and 100% mentally focused for motivation to fall into their lap. But why don't you scrap that narrative and instead of relying on motivation, because that is a limit at the end of the day, because you are limiting yourself to only do things when you are motivated, why don't you start relying on action and discipline? By doing this, you're telling yourself that things need to be executed. Daily non-negotiables need to be actioned even on the days when you are not motivated. That on its own is already forcing you to zone in mentally because you know that shit has to get done. Whereas if you keep telling yourself you're relying on motivation, you are leaving yourself a lot of wiggle room to not do certain things. Your environment is another limitation, maybe self-created limitation, and it can be very hard to push through this limit considering your environment are certain things that you are surrounded by on a daily basis. So to make it easier, for the lack of better words, to push through this limit, to navigate an environment that is maybe not set up to be aligned with your health and fat loss goals, why don't you rather work on creating an environment that is more aligned with your health and fat loss goals? By doing that, it does become, again, for the lack of better words, slightly easier to push through the difficult times because your environment will sort of be supporting you as opposed to setting you up for failure. You want your environment to make it easier for you instead of making it harder for you. Another limit that could potentially be a limit of yours is maybe the fact that you are scared of discomfort. You know, your comfort zone is guarded by irrational fears that you have potentially created to keep you safeguarded in your comfort zone because of that fear of discomfort. The only way to mentally zone in here and to push through that fear is to actually do it and realize that it's not that bad. Discomfort is a place of growth. That is where things grow. That is where you learn about yourself. And like I said, that is where growth takes place. Instead of seeing discomfort as a limit or something stopping you from moving forward, why don't you look at it from a positive perspective and say, I need to feel discomfort. You need to feel discomfort so that you can continue growing, so that you can continue progressing. And like I said, so many people ask, how do you mentally zone in to push through the difficult parts, to push through those limits? And to do the difficult things? Well, like I mentioned now, oftentimes you need to first identify what your limits are. You need to identify what the difficult things are. And you need to ask yourself, are you creating those limits and in turn making it more difficult to zone in mentally than what it already is? And if that's the case, then start making those changes that I have spoken of. Remove that scale from the equation. Set yourself smaller little points of celebrations or victories. Set up an environment that actually helps you succeed as opposed to one that makes it feel like you constantly need to zone in mentally to push through difficult phases. Get excited about feeling discomfort, knowing that that is where you grow. Don't be scared of it. Don't withdraw if something slightly challenging falls upon your way. That's actually the moment where you need to be like, let's tackle this to see what I'm made of, what you are made of, what you can do. Because the moment you start tackling those difficult things, that's the moment that you are pushing certain limits. That's the moment where you are mentally zoned in. Don't be scared of failing. So many people are scared of failing and they're too scared to zone in mentally. So it's basically like you stopping yourself from doing it. And it's most likely out of fear. But don't be scared. There's nothing. The only time you fail is when you stop trying. Other than that, all of it is micro failures, little stumbles, fumbles, whatever you want to call it. But what I like calling it is learning blocks, because you can learn from it. And that is how you get stronger to be able to push through future limits or future difficulties or future struggles. The thing is, you can either sit there and tell yourself that you can't do difficult things, or that something is too difficult, or that the struggle is too much, or that the hurdle is too big for you to get over, or you can actually try. You can try and continue trying to push through the difficult phases, or you can stop and always ask yourself, what if? And actually just start believing in yourself. Start doing the difficult things, man, because that's where you actually prove to yourself what you are capable of doing. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you like I usually do. Keep smiling, keep laughing, and keep being kind to one another. Much love, your friend who can't wait for you to join the 4-week challenge, Mandy.